For centuries, the Galactic Council had watched humanity with cautious interest. Spread across dozens of star systems, humans had quickly become known for their rapid technological advancements, their unpredictable nature, and an unyielding desire for independence. The Council, made up of the most powerful and ancient species in the galaxy, had long debated how best to handle the growing influence of this relatively young and impulsive species. For a time, the humans were tolerated. Their breakthroughs in science, medicine, and technology were impressive, and though they often ignored or even challenged the Council's decisions, they were never seen as a real threat, at least not until now. When Earth, the cradle of humanity, suddenly issued a shocking declaration, the very foundation of the Galactic Council seemed to tremble. In a broadcast that spread across the galaxy like wildfire, humanity announced that it was withdrawing from the Council completely. The message was short, cryptic, and to the point. Effective immediately, Earth ceases all communications, trade, and alliances with the Galactic Council. We will no longer be part of your politics, your wars, or your agreements. The broadcast left the galaxy in stunned silence. The Council, used to seeing every species fall in line with their laws, now found themselves in a unique position, confusion mixed with unease. How could this happen? Why would a species, whose very existence was intertwined with the Council's operations, suddenly decide to sever all ties without any warning? As word spread across the galaxy, a whisper of fear began to take root. Was this a sign of rebellion, or was it something worse? The Council's most influential members called an emergency meeting. The most powerful species, those whose history stretched back millennia, sat in their grand chambers, arguing among themselves. Some believed that humanity's departure was an empty threat, an act of pride from a young species that was bound to return. But others felt something darker in the air, a sense that this was no ordinary act of defiance. They had always underestimated the humans, chalking up their outbursts to naivety, a lack of experience, and impulsiveness. But now, as the leaders of the Council exchanged nervous glances, they couldn't shake the feeling that this time, humanity had done something far more dangerous. The humans weren't retreating out of fear or weakness, they were walking away. And in doing so, they were sending a clear message. They no longer needed the Council. This was a critical turning point. The Council, which had always prided itself on its control over the galaxy, was suddenly faced with an unsettling reality. Humanity might not return, but even worse, they might have already become something more than the Council had ever imagined. It wasn't just the loss of Earth that worried them. The true weight of the announcement lay in the fact that humanity had always been underestimated. The Council had assumed their fiery, rebellious nature would eventually burn out, that their lack of regard for galactic laws would eventually lead to their downfall. But this sudden, clean break with the galaxy felt different. It was as if humans were quietly positioning themselves for something grander, something far beyond the scope of anything the Council could comprehend. No one knew exactly what the humans were planning, but there was one thing that everyone agreed on. This move was deliberate, and it signaled a shift in the power dynamic of the galaxy. In the quiet corners of Council chambers, hushed voices spoke of a deep, unsettling truth that few were willing to acknowledge. Humanity was not just a species that had risen from nothing. They had already been shaping their future in secret, creating technologies, alliances, and strategies that were beyond the reach of the Council. For the first time, the Council was no longer in control of the narrative. And though it was hard to admit, the truth loomed over them like a shadow. The humans had always been the wild card. Now, as they walked away, they were on the verge of unleashing something far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. The galaxy had just witnessed the first move of a species that was done waiting for permission. The Council may have thought they knew everything about humanity, but now the humans had proven something critical. They were far more than anyone had bargained for, and if the Council didn't understand that soon, they might learn just how dangerous it is to underestimate the ones you thought you had already conquered. As days passed since humanity's sudden withdrawal from the Galactic Council, a sense of unease slowly settled across the galaxy. The Council, still reeling from the shock of Earth's decision, turned its attention to humanity's scattered colonies, now isolated across the far reaches of space. These colonies, once viewed as mere outposts of human expansion, were beginning to show signs of something much more significant: self-sufficiency. No longer dependent on the Council's resources or protection, the humans had quickly adapted to their new independence. In several systems, entire cities had sprouted up, flourishing under the careful management of human ingenuity. Advanced technology, previously thought to be out of reach for these distant outposts, was now commonplace. There were no more supply shortages, no more reliance on trade routes that the Council controlled. These colonies were thriving, and their military forces, though small, were not to be underestimated. Equipped with cutting-edge weapons and tactics, these human forces could now hold their ground against the galaxy's fiercest species, even the most aggressive ones that had once bullied them into submission. Back in the heart of the Galactic Council, the representatives of the various species gathered in tense meetings, discussing humanity's bold move. The Elantor, a species known for their ancient wisdom, believed that the humans' decision was an impulsive one, a moment of defiance that would eventually pass. "They'll come back," one of the Elantor leaders said with a confident tone. "They cannot survive on their own for long. They'll need us." The words were comforting, but they failed to soothe the unease that was growing within the other members. The Retharians, a cold-blooded species that valued only strength, were less sure. They had seen humanity fight back before, and they were beginning to suspect that this was not just another one of their brash outbursts. Meanwhile, the more diplomatic species, like the Avarians, sought to find a peaceful solution. Their message was simple: humanity would eventually realize the value of unity, and they would return to the fold. But what none of them could see, what none of them understood, was the quiet storm that humanity was carefully preparing. The humans weren't retreating into isolation, they were building. They were strengthening their position in ways the Council couldn't imagine. As the galaxy continued its daily routine, the humans were quietly expanding their reach. New alliances were being formed with lesser-known species, many of whom had been overlooked by the Council. Ancient technologies, long buried beneath Earth's surface and forgotten by time, were being revived and repurposed. The humans had not just walked away from the Council, they had walked away with a purpose. They had found something far beyond what anyone could have anticipated, a power that could shift the very balance of the galaxy. In secret, humanity was using the time they had gained to prepare. They were not only fortifying their colonies, but creating new weapons, the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. The vast networks of communication that had once relied on the Council were now being replaced with a new independent system, built to be far more secure and efficient. No one would be able to track or intercept humanity's movements anymore. The Council, focused on their own debates and political maneuvering, was blind to the quiet preparations taking place. Humanity had learned to adapt, to work in the shadows, and to build without the interference of those who had once ruled over them. The Council's members were growing more divided by the day. Some, like the Avarians, still believed in peaceful negotiations, hopeful that humanity's isolation was temporary. Others, particularly the Retharians, saw an opportunity to strike before humanity became too strong. "They will regret their decision," one of the Retharian leaders growled. "If they do not return, we will make them." Yet, despite the growing tension, the Council remained unaware of the full extent of humanity's preparations. They thought the humans were merely a nuisance, a rebellious species that would eventually see the value in rejoining the fold. But in the quiet, distant corners of the galaxy, the humans were moving in silence, biding their time, preparing to change everything. The storm, they knew, would come. And when it did, it would not be the humans who would bow down. The Council, for all their power, was about to learn that the true strength of humanity was not just in their technology, but in their ability to act when no one was watching, to rise when the odds were against them. The galaxy was about to change, and the Council had no idea what was coming. In the darkest corners of space, far beyond the reach of the Galactic Council's watchful eyes, a hidden force stirred to life. For years, humanity had silently bided its time, keeping its greatest weapon hidden away, out of sight, out of reach. This was no ordinary fleet, no simple group of warships. It was a force built in secret, an armada of human-made warships designed during humanity's earliest days of interstellar exploration, ships so advanced that even the most experienced engineers in the galaxy would have called them impossible. These vessels had been dormant for centuries, tucked away on remote, forgotten stations at the edges of known space, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had arrived. When the fleet finally reactivated, it did so with a quiet efficiency that spoke of years of preparation. The ships, sleek and powerful, were unlike anything the Galactic Council had encountered. Their technology was far beyond the capabilities of any known species, a perfect blend of ancient human ingenuity and alien advancements they had acquired over the years. These ships did not simply travel through space, they adapted to their surroundings, learning and evolving with each encounter. Their AI systems, sophisticated and intuitive, made them nearly impossible to outwit or defeat. The ships could adapt their weapons, shields, and strategies mid-battle, making them an ever-changing, ever-threatening force. At first, the Council believed it was a mistake, a rogue signal, or an anomaly. But as the fleet began to move, it became clear that this was no accident. Humanity had been hiding its true potential for a reason, and now the galaxy was about to pay the price. The first major strike came when the fleet attacked a Council outpost at the edge of human space. The defenders, caught off guard, were swiftly overwhelmed. In mere hours, a station that had once been thought impregnable was reduced to rubble, and the humans' fleet moved on, leaving nothing but silence behind them. News of the attack spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the Council. The Assembly had always believed that humanity, despite their rebellious nature, was not a serious threat. The humans, they assumed, were too young, too disorganized, to challenge the might of the Council. But as the fleet's strikes continued, the reality set in. Humanity was no longer the scrappy underdog. They had become something far more dangerous, organized, calculated, and powerful. The Council's initial reaction was panic. Diplomatic channels were flooded with frantic messages, orders were sent to assemble the finest fleets in the galaxy, and yet, despite all their efforts, nothing seemed to stop the relentless advance of the human armada. The first Council warships that attempted to engage the human fleet were obliterated before they even had a chance to retaliate. The humans' warships, with their adaptive technology, dodged every attack, each counterattack hitting its target with devastating accuracy. The Council's best and brightest engineers had spent lifetimes designing their most advanced ships, but they were no match for the raw, unpredictable brilliance of humanity's secret fleet. The Council commanders watched helplessly as their ships were torn apart, one after another, as if they were nothing more than fragile toys in the hands of a child. Desperation set in. The Council began to send out more and more fleets, hoping that sheer numbers might overwhelm the human forces. But this only made matters worse. The human fleet, with its advanced tactics and superior intelligence, began to pick off the Council ships systematically, never engaging in open combat unless they were sure of victory. Each battle was a carefully calculated move, each victory a step closer to dismantling the power structure the Council had spent millennia building. The humans seemed to know exactly where to strike, when to move, and how to avoid every trap set for them. It was as if they were always one step ahead. As the Council's fleets continued to fall, the panic reached a fever pitch. Some members of the Council, who had previously dismissed humanity as nothing more than a nuisance, now realized the terrifying truth: they had greatly underestimated humanity's capabilities. It wasn't just the ships or the weapons that made the humans dangerous. It was their ability to think, adapt, and survive against overwhelming odds. The humans had always been unpredictable, but now their unpredictability was becoming a deadly weapon, and the Council had no answers, no countermeasures, and no hope of victory. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. And as the final reports of destroyed fleets reached the council chambers, the realization hit them all at once. Humanity was no longer a species on the fringes of galactic politics. They had awakened something far greater, something the council had never imagined. And now they were paying the price for underestimating the humans. The storm was just beginning, and there was no telling how much damage it would cause. The Galactic Council, once confident in their superiority, could no longer ignore the growing threat humanity posed. With each passing day, the reports from their fleets were more disturbing. The humans, once dismissed as rebellious and chaotic, had transformed into an unstoppable force. The Council had already lost too many of their best fleets to be able to pretend this was just a minor issue. Panic spread through their ranks as they struggled to comprehend what had gone wrong. Despite their advanced technology and immense power, they were losing to a species that, until recently, they had thought to be primitive. As the Council's members gathered for an emergency session, the atmosphere was tense, filled with uncertainty and fear. In the midst of this panic, one voice spoke up, calm and measured. A representative of the Elantor, an ancient species known for their vast mental abilities and wisdom. The Elantor had always been respected for their psychic prowess, their ability to perceive things that others could not. The leader of the Elantor species, a being known as Veliar, stepped forward, his expression grave. "We have underestimated the humans," he said, his voice carrying the weight of knowledge. "Their power is not just in their ships or weapons, but in something far more dangerous, something none of us could have predicted. They possess a unique force, one that no other species in the galaxy understands. It is not just their technology that makes them formidable, it is their will." The Council listened in stunned silence. Veliar continued, explaining that humanity had something no other species could replicate, an untapped potential within their collective consciousness. This force, he claimed, was fueled by human emotion, creativity, and their relentless drive to survive. Where other species relied on logic, power, and advanced systems of control, humans drew strength from a deeper, more primal force, a shared willpower that, when combined, became a force greater than anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans, he explained, were learning how to harness this power and integrate it with their technology. And it was this combination of inner strength and innovation that made them nearly invincible. The Council, desperate for answers, tried to focus on a solution. They sent their finest diplomats to Earth, hoping that by negotiating directly with the humans, they could somehow convince them to return to the fold. But when the diplomats arrived on Earth, they were confronted with something far beyond their expectations. The humans, seemingly aware of the Council's motives, greeted them not with hostility, but with a quiet certainty that sent shivers down their spines. Earth had changed, and the humans had changed with it. The diplomats were led to a facility unlike any they had seen before, an enormous, bustling center filled with scientists, engineers, and thinkers working together in harmony. It was a place where emotion and technology intertwined, where human creativity flowed freely, unrestricted by the rigid systems the Council relied upon. Here, humans had developed something entirely new, a form of communication that bypassed the traditional technological methods used by the galaxy's species. This new system was based on the very essence of human emotion and thought, a technology that tapped into the collective consciousness of humanity itself. As the diplomats observed the humans in action, they realized that the humans' greatest weapon was not their advanced ships or weapons, but the sheer force of their willpower. When humans worked together, when their emotions and minds aligned, they were capable of creating technology far beyond anything the Council had ever imagined. The technology itself was adaptive, able to learn and evolve based on the needs of the collective. It was a system that could grow and change in ways the Council's rigid, structured technology never could. This revelation was a shock to the diplomats. The Council had always relied on control, on the precision of logic and power. But humans had developed something far more unpredictable, something that was driven by their deep desire for freedom, for progress, and for survival. The diplomats left Earth with a new understanding, but it was too late. The humans had already figured out how to unlock the full potential of their collective consciousness. The Council, realizing they could not stop what was coming, was left to contemplate a terrifying truth. Humanity was not just a species to be tolerated or controlled. They were a force that could change the very fabric of the galaxy, and that force, now fully awakened, would soon reshape everything they thought they knew. The galaxy trembled as the balance of power shifted in ways the Galactic Council had never anticipated. The humans, once seen as little more than a nuisance, were now a rising force that could no longer be ignored. Their growing dominance, fueled by their remarkable adaptability and unrelenting drive, sent ripples of fear through the more conservative factions within the Council. Unable to accept the inevitability of humanity's ascent, a coalition of species, united in their desire to maintain control, formed a final, desperate alliance. They believed they could still break the spirit of humanity and crush their rise before it could fully take root. The coalition's plan was simple. They would launch a series of coordinated attacks on the human colonies, hoping to shatter their will to resist. They struck first at the outermost human colonies, assuming that they would be weak, vulnerable, and unprepared. But what the Council had underestimated was the unity and resilience of the humans. The colonies, built with painstaking effort and fortified with humanity's best technologies, fought back fiercely. No one had expected this. The humans were not only capable of defending themselves, they were relentless in their pursuit of justice for the lives lost in battle. The humans' response was swift and decisive. Within hours of the first attack, the human fleet mobilized, and the coalition found themselves under assault. But this was no ordinary counterattack. The humans had learned from their past encounters with the Council, and now they demonstrated their mastery of both technology and strategy. They moved with precision, hitting key targets with devastating accuracy. Their ships, advanced, adaptive, and almost impossible to predict, struck where the coalition was weakest, ambushing their fleets with devastating results. It was not brute force that made the humans so formidable, but their ability to think ahead, to strike where it would hurt the most. The coalition's fleets, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, were now facing a new kind of warfare, one where every move was calculated, every attack a carefully planned assault. The humans struck at supply lines, crippled communication systems, and sabotaged military bases with chilling efficiency. Each ambush was more devastating than the last, leaving the coalition's fleets scattered and disorganized. The humans had not only managed to defend their colonies, but they had turned the tide of war with a series of surprise attacks that left their enemies in disarray. In every battle, the humans proved that their greatest strength lay not in sheer firepower, but in their adaptability. They had learned to think on their feet, adjusting their tactics mid-battle to meet changing circumstances. No battle was ever the same for the humans. Their forces had an uncanny ability to evolve, shifting strategies based on the immediate needs of the conflict. While the coalition's forces stuck to rigid battle plans and predictable tactics, the humans flowed like water, finding the gaps, exploiting the weaknesses, and using every opportunity to their advantage. It was becoming clear to the coalition that they were not just facing a war of attrition, they were facing an opponent that was always 2 steps ahead. The humans' unity, once a point of weakness in the eyes of the galaxy, had now become their greatest strength. Every human colony, every outpost, every fleet acted as a single cohesive force. The entire human race, it seemed, was now united in purpose, with no intention of backing down. The thought of stopping them seemed impossible. No matter how hard the coalition tried, no matter how many fleets they sent, the humans kept coming. Their resilience was unbreakable. Soon, the coalition began to feel the pressure of their failing efforts. Their fleets, once proud and mighty, were now crumbling under the weight of humanity's counterattacks. With each victory, the humans' reputation grew. They were no longer seen as mere rebels. They were a force of nature, a rising power that could not be contained. The galaxy had no answer to their relentless march. The Council, watching from the shadows, realized that they had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity's potential for unity and innovation. The humans, it seemed, were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to shape the future of the galaxy, to take their place as equals among the stars. And now, with each passing day, they were proving that they were more than capable of doing just that. As the human forces continued to push forward, the coalition's resolve began to falter. They had underestimated humanity once before, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The unstoppable march of the humans was just beginning, and there was no telling how far they would go or how much more the galaxy would change as a result. The rise of humanity had begun, and the galaxy was about to witness a new era. As the war dragged on, the once sturdy unity of the Galactic Council began to crumble. What had started as a brief skirmish between the humans and a few of the galaxy's most powerful species had transformed into an all-out conflict that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Each victory for humanity seemed to erode the Council's cohesion further, as more and more species within the Council questioned their decisions. The proud Elantor, long regarded as the wisest of the galaxy's species, found themselves reflecting on their past misjudgments. They had once believed that humanity's withdrawal from the galactic fold was nothing more than a temporary defiance, a fleeting moment of rebellion. But as the war intensified and the human strength became undeniable, the Elantor, along with several other species, began to reconsider the true meaning of humanity's departure. Could the humans have been trying to tell them something all along? Could their withdrawal have been a warning that the Council's time was ending and that a new era was on the horizon? As the realization dawned on the Council, the cracks within their once unified front deepened. A growing faction of leaders within the Council saw the humans rise as an inevitable shift of power, one that could no longer be ignored. These leaders began to question the foundation of the Council itself. They saw how the humans had advanced, how they had grown in ways that the Council, with all its centuries of knowledge and technology, had failed to do. The more the leaders learned about humanity, the clearer it became. It was not just the humans' technology or their military force that had propelled them to this point. It was their unwavering drive, their ability to adapt, and their relentless pursuit of progress that had made them a force unlike any other. It was no longer a matter of whether the humans would be defeated. It was a question of how the galaxy would move forward in the wake of their rise. The once proud Council, composed of species that had ruled the galaxy for eons, was now facing the painful truth of their own stagnation and arrogance. For centuries, they believed that their dominance was invulnerable, that their wisdom and strength would always keep them on top. But now they saw that humanity had not only caught up to them, they had surpassed them in ways they had never considered. The Council had spent centuries entrenched in their own power, too blind to see the winds of change sweeping across the galaxy. The humans, however, had recognized the need to evolve and grow, and now they were reaping the rewards of their willingness to push forward into uncharted territory. In a desperate attempt to salvage the Council's fractured position, a group of prominent leaders from various species proposed a bold move: peace talks with Earth. They hoped that if they could negotiate with the humans, perhaps they could restore some form of balance and stability to the galaxy. These leaders, however, underestimated the humans' new perspective on the situation. What they didn't realize was that the humans had now come to see themselves as equals, not subordinates. They had not only advanced technologically, but they had also learned how to manipulate the political systems that had once governed them. When the humans agreed to meet with the Council's diplomats, it was clear that they were no longer the desperate, vulnerable species they had once been. The humans now sat at the table not as petitioners, but as leaders in their own right, confident in their newfound power. They demanded something the Council had never expected: a new framework of governance, one where humanity would not be subjugated to the will of the Council, but where they would be treated as equals. The humans had learned how to use not only their technological innovations, but their strategic minds to shape the political landscape. They understood that true power lay in not just military strength, but in the ability to bend the will of others to one's advantage. The humans' demands were simple but profound. They wanted a system where strength and wisdom were respected above all else, where no species would dominate another, and where alliances were forged on equal terms. They made it clear that the era of one species holding power over another was over. The galaxy, they insisted, would enter a new age of mutual respect, where each species would be judged not by their ancient traditions, but by their ability to evolve, to adapt, and to contribute to the greater whole. For the Council, this was a devastating blow. They had never considered that the humans, a species so young in the galactic scene, would turn the tables on them in such a dramatic fashion. The Council members, long accustomed to deciding the fate of others, now found themselves faced with the possibility of their own downfall. They had underestimated humanity's potential, and now the humans were demanding nothing less than a new era of governance. A new order where the Council's outdated systems would no longer hold sway. As the talks began, the galaxy stood on the precipice of monumental change. The humans had already proven they could win battles, but now they were ready to win the future. The real question was no longer whether humanity could survive. It was whether the galaxy could accept them as equals, or if the Council would continue to resist, ultimately driving the galaxy into deeper chaos. The tension that had been building over months finally reached its breaking point. The peace talks, once seen as the last hope to prevent further conflict, came to a grinding halt. The representatives from the Galactic Council, desperate to maintain their fading control, tried to impose their old rules, clinging to the notion that they still held the upper hand. But the humans, who had once been considered little more than an afterthought in the galactic balance, were no longer willing to accept second-class status. They had spent years preparing, quietly biding their time, and now their confidence had transformed into an undeniable force. The Council's outdated systems of control, built on centuries of dominance, no longer held sway in the face of humanity's newfound strength. It became abundantly clear that the Galactic Council's days were numbered. The humans, once seen as a fledgling species on the fringes of galactic power, had now fully emerged as the galaxy's dominant force. Their technological prowess, their innovative spirit, and their ability to adapt to any situation made them nearly unstoppable. They had learned not just how to survive in the harsh realities of space, but how to thrive, to lead, and to shape the very future of the stars themselves. Their unity, once viewed as a weakness, was now their greatest strength. No longer divided by petty political interests, humanity had forged a society based on cooperation, progress, and an unyielding drive toward a better future. In the end, it was not just their advanced technology or their formidable military power that allowed them to rise. It was their collective willpower, the unshakable belief that they were meant for more than what the Council had assigned them. Where other species had been content to rule with fear and tradition, humanity had broken free from the chains of the past. They had walked away from the Council, not out of desperation, but because they knew they were destined for something greater. They had recognized that they were not just a part of the galaxy's history, they were now shaping its future. As the peace talks collapsed, the humans made their move. They no longer needed the Council's approval or permission. With their fleets positioned across the galaxy, they took their place at the helm, not as subordinates, but as leaders in their own right. They were no longer content with merely surviving. They had come to conquer, to build, and to govern a galaxy that was ready for change. Their message was clear: the old order was finished, and a new one was rising in its place. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity asserted its control. The once powerful Council, now divided and weakened, could only stand by and watch as the humans took their place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted, and there was no turning back. No species, no matter how powerful, could deny the truth: humanity had arrived. The story concluded with a final broadcast sent out to every corner of the galaxy, a message that echoed across the stars. It was simple, yet powerful, and left an indelible mark on every species that heard it. We walked away because we knew we were destined for more than subjugation. This galaxy is ours to lead. With those words, humanity's ascension was complete. The old powers had fallen, and the age of humanity had begun. As the stars shimmered in the vast expanse of space, the galaxy understood that it was no longer governed by ancient empires or stagnant councils. A new dawn had arrived, one led by a species that had shown the universe that anything was possible when you refused to be held back. The humans had carved their place among the stars, and they were just getting started. The future was now in their hands.